Conversations across time. Conversations across time.
Hi, I'm Mark Hoffman, former history teacher, now currently a proud member of the Conversations Across Time family. I'd like to introduce to you tonight's show. Tonight's show deals with two primary issues. One, Russia's quest for a warm water port, as it explains Vladimir Putin's aggression in the Crimean and Ukraine. Also, we will discuss blunders made by the European powers during and after World War I that possibly led to the current conflicts in the Middle East.
Welcome to Conversations Across Time. For those of you that were with us last week, you will recall that we were immersed in a very heated conversation. So what I'm going to do is introduce the panel to you, and we're going to pick up where we left off, because I think that anyone that is tuning in this time understands just how important this conversation is. So seated to my left is my friend and the co-host of Conversations Across Time from the very beginning, former Pennsylvania State Representative Babette Josephs. Welcome, Babby.
Thank you. This is a great pleasure. I enjoy this.
We enjoy you. We do. Now, what we're going to do is we'll start with, seated to my right is Fyodor Dostoevsky. And of course, most of you know him as an author, but I don't know if most of you know that he was actually considered the father of modern psychology. And I welcome Mr. Dostoevsky. We hold you in such high esteem.
Glad to be here, Lestravia.
Now, seated next to Mr. Dostoevsky is a character that has really played in history, and most of you probably do not know, and that is Mr. Hussein bin Ali. Welcome, Sharif Ali.
Thank you.
And the reason that he is very important is, for all of you that saw the movie Lawrence of Arabia, this is the Omar Sharif character. This is a real person. Yes, he was a real person, and you need to understand what happened to the movement that was led by Mr. Ali. Seated next to Mr. Ali, opposite me again, is someone who, quite frankly, I love having on the show, because he's such a controversial figure, and we don't think that you know as much as you should know about former Secretary of State John Foster Dulles.
Madam.
Welcome, Secretary Dulles.
Madam.
Now, we thought, we ended on such a heated note. And what we've done is we've actually put a map up, and we're going to refer to that map. But the first thing that we'd like to know from you, Secretary Dulles, is you are someone who, there's no question for anyone that's a fan of the show, we know that I disagree with your policies.
It doesn't matter to me, ma'am, whether you do or not.
That is part of your arrogance.
Yes, persona.
We accept that. That's why we're happy that you're here. And what I would like to ask you, Secretary Dulles, is if you were Secretary of State now, today, 2015, 2016, what would you do different from what we see Secretary John Kerry doing as pertains to the crisis that currently is happening in the Middle East?
I would prefer a more vigorous response than what the current administration is doing, and it may require some military intervention to stabilize the region. And I know you don't like to face that reality, but it is the reality that military force may be necessary to stabilize the region.
Please excuse me.
Yes.
To stabilize the region.
That is correct, sir.
When Westerners use this word stabilize, I think that word doesn't mean what you think it means. The stability, they only see stability when it's profitable for them.
So for Western interests.
Western commercial interests, which we benefit from through our industry, madam.
The Arabian Desert was perfectly stable when it was full of herders, traveling back and forth, grazing their herds where possible and following water. That's very stable. It's a stable way of life. But the intervention that your beloved military and the military of similar countries, the intervention you've been making for the last 200 years hasn't added to anyone's stability other than your own. The
Even
British,
then, I'm
the-
not sure.
the-
I'm not even sure that that's the case.
well,
You could make an argument, but
profit.
go ahead.
Profit is the only form of stability that you recognize.
But see, what they're saying, or what the secretary is saying, is that there are military solutions. And
There
I don't
have been no-
believe in this world there is anything like a military solution. There are political solutions where people work out on the ground level what needs to be done and what needs they have and how to fulfill them.
That is a fine utopian vision, madam, but people will pursue their interests as they see it. And there are very unstable situations in the world. And so,
Which is to say, we're
Well,
not
yeah,
getting their profits.
Mr. Secretary, the intervention in Libya, the intervention in Iraq, didn't cause any stabilization. It caused destabilization and led to the problems that the United States and the rest of the world is having now. So why would you think intervention would stabilize the region? It would probably destabilize them. And how does my President Putin, how is his control of warm water ports to Ukraine and the Crimean a threat to anything that you hold dear in Western society? How is that a threat to
Well,
you?
there'd be a
because your
competition to
hunt for your
us.
precious warm water ports is that threatens the sovereignty of sovereign nations such
What
as
sovereign
Ukraine.
nation
Well,
are
we
you
don't care
talking
about
about?
Primarily Ukraine. Mr. Putin's government is constantly interfering in the internal affairs of Ukraine, constantly seizing the eastern provinces of
But you know
Ukraine.
what-
If
So-
you didn't
ex-
see,
ex-
if you didn't see the Ukraine as a valuable territory as an ally,
For NATO,
you would have no
correct.
interest in their
Exactly.
sovereignty.
Right, and
Exactly right.
That's not
I-
necessarily
Exactly
so,
right.
sir.
I
Exactly
think the
right.
problem with Russia having warm water ports is then they become much more competitive with interests in the United States that are also commercial along the same lines.
They
So,
fear China at least as much as they fear
as they
Russia.
The
should.
United States fears no nation, sir.
Okay, you know something, here's what I'd like to ask. Because I earlier, I certainly know that when the first part of this conversation, I alluded to the fact that you, as a participant, as a person who was present at the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, that you essentially welched on the agreement that you had with the Sharif. Now, certain things happen.
Probably never had the intention of actually following
No,
through
you- and-
from the very beginning, but let's go ahead.
No, but
Sorry.
you're right. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. But what happened is you encouraged Mr. bin Ali to unite the Arabs to fight the Ottoman Empire so that it would advance the interests of Britain and the United States and France as pertains to the war that was going. That's the First World War. And at the end of the First World War, you knew that there was an agreement that it existed, that there would be a caliph, that the establishment of the caliphate would be protected. But you did not live up to that agreement. And I guess we're all sitting here trying to figure out, in hindsight, why it is that you and the Western powers felt you had a right to divvy up the Middle East along the lines that you did, because that's what led to where we are
That's
now.
what
They didn't-
military
We were the
They had
powers.
a-
We were the dominant
That's how
powers of
military
the
solutions do.
excuse me, madam, but we were the dominant powers of the world, the British and the French, and only they could maintain the stability required for these nations to develop proper and functioning nation states.
so that we could
No,
exploit
so
their
that you could get their
resources.
oil
We
and
mean
exploit
develop
other
their
people.
develop their resources.
Okay.
So,
Now, that, please, I'm sorry. I guess sometimes I just get annoyed and because I hear you glossing over history, and I want to be clear. Let us talk about the fact that 1906, Secretary of the Navy for Great Britain was a man whose name we all know, Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill realized as Secretary of Her Majesty's, or His Majesty's Navy, that it was in their best interest to use oil as opposed to coal to fuel their ships. Because coal England had, but that oil fueling the ships was going to be much more efficient. Now, then a commodity that Mr. bin Ali and the Middle Eastern had an abundance of was oil. So essentially, you and your ilk decided that Mr. bin Ali and his fellow compatriots didn't have a proper need for oil, but that the Western imperialist powers did. Now, that's just the stage that I'm setting. Anyone can jump in at any point, but I want to say that. Why is it that you and your people felt it was your divine right to take a commodity that existed in the Middle East, divvy up the Middle East according to the way that you wanted?
This is a simple question to answer. And the answer comes from a very basic belief. You see, there is an idea that has existed for many years, this idea of the people of the book. Now, the faith of the Hebrews, the faith of the Christians, the faith, all of the Abrahamic faiths, Islam, Christianity,
And I'm happy that
Judaism,
you make that extension, that they're all Abrahamic faiths.
all of these faiths share a common legacy, but the followers of these faiths have, in many cases, made significant departures from the letter and the spirit of the laws they claim to follow. This idea of divine right to some territory, someone else's territory, is not supported by any of the books. It's not supported by the most holy Quran. It is not supported by the Torah, and it's certainly not supported in any of the teachings of Jesus. It is a twisting of the words of faith. And you can never expect this poor lost soul to honestly make an accounting for the actions.
And it surprises me greatly because, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Secretary, your father was a minister, was he not?
Yes, he was a very fine man, but it raised me to sincerely abide by my faith. I have acted upon that faith in my capacity as Secretary of State. I believe, I've always believed, I still believe, and I will continue to believe, that the United States of America is truly best suited after the Second World War to be the dominant power through its superior morality, its superior institutions, and the superior free enterprises. Oh yes, I do, madam.
These Westerners are obsessed with dominance.
That is the way the world is, sir. Dominance or submission.
But why are you?
If you are not the dominant person, you are being taken advantage of. It is always better to be dominant than submissive.
Are you saying
like
because they are
terrified
non-Christian countries?
Yes, yes.
Because
Is
they are
that
not
your
dominant.
implication because
Because
they
they
are
are not
not-
dominant countries, sir.
I want to ask a question.
Yes.
He fears his own sword.
I
Yes.
do
That's why
not
he
fear.
points it at
The
everyone
United
else.
States
You
fears
know-
nothing or nobody.
But you know that one of the justifications you had is they were non-Christians.
I did not say that, sir. I simply said that they had oil that they did not know they have the sense to develop, and we have developed it through our
Seems like
private
they're
enterprise
developing it
system.
fine
But
for
your
themselves
implication,
right now.
and last week when we were discussing that, you degraded the Islamic cultures of the Middle East. You said they weren't a great culture, and we had to correct you on that. So the implication I'm getting from you is you think that Western Christian culture is superior. That's the implication.
Because it is. And when you look at the
Superior to what?
when you look at the Western culture compared to the Muslim culture of my day, you can see how much they need us to develop their oil industry and thus their civilization.
It's the white man's burden all over
Yes.
again.
That is true,
What
madam.
would you say
More
about-
true than you are willing to admit.
I
What
would
would you
never
say
admit.
about Mother Russia and our holy Christianity, Mr. Dulles?
Your holy Christianity is very backward. Your
Why is it
nation has
backwards?
been 98% peasants, illiterate peasants under the czars, and you, quite frankly, you are worthy of your backwardness.
You know what I think of Western Christianity? It became too liberal, and it bastardized the beliefs that true Christianity had. And
How can you have a
Eastern
famous-
Orthodox Christianity is far superior to yours.
How can you have
I
a
don't
person...
care what you believe, sir.
I do not know all that much about the faith that you claim to share, but these words that you're using, they do not sound anything like the words of the most holy prophet.
You're right.
And they do not sound like the words of the prophet Jesus, peace
Well,
be
they
upon
don't
him.
They are the
sound
words
even
of the
logical.
world as it truly is.
They're not even logical. Here he's claiming 98% of the population was illiterate. We have a famous author who was read by millions of people in his own country.
Was every person
For God's sake.
in Russia a famous novelist? I
All
don't
you
think
need
so,
is
madam.
one. And
One
everybody
among
reads them.
millions
They're
upon
not
millions.
illiterate.
May I ask, because your father was a minister,
Yes.
and you say that he raised you in his true belief.
He did. Yeah.
Now, I suppose what strikes me about that is the similarities that exist, and I was actually looking through my notes because I remember asking myself this question, and that is, how is it that Zionists, the Crusaders, and the believers of a holy jihad, what is the difference between them? Because all three seem to be misguided and to be under the belief that their belief set is better than someone else's. So that brush paints across a lot of people. Because I do not believe, as I sit here, that the jihadists represent what it is that the prophet, peace be upon him, envisioned. I do not believe that the Zionists represent what it was that Theodor Herzl envisioned when he first said that there needed to be a homeland for Jews. And I also feel that what it is that the Crusades represented, the massacre in the Middle East, thinking that they had some right because of the personages of, as I call him, probably one of the most evolved human beings, and that is Jesus Christ, evolved as a human being. What is it that makes your imperialism, your ethnocentrism, your belief that you are better, what makes you different from Zionists, from the jihadists, and from the Crusades?
It simply is, madam. I mean, the American so-called imperial project has always sought to uplift the civilizations it has made contact with, such as in Cuba, such as in the Philippines, such as in Puerto Rico.
Uplift
you-
how?
That is what is our...
Your choice of the word uplift implies that these other cultures into which you have come into contact, these other cultures, you believe that they are beneath you inherently, but these other cultures have their own values and they have their own pursuits that they would, I'm certain, like to continue in peace without your influence.
You care nothing about those cultures. You care about the economic and geopolitical interests of the United States.
That is my duty as Secretary of State,
And-
and I will continue to do
Well,
so.
but that's not what you said.
And-
You said you cared about. Now, if you want to be honest and say we're greedy and we needed the resources and we needed to protect them, protect the United States against maybe communism, or this is a different system that would not further the economic interest of the United States, then you would be honest. But don't say you wanted to uplift them.
Well,
He does
Uplift them.
not wish to uplift the people. He wishes to uplift nothing other than his own backside.
Yes,
Yes.
and they
That's
will.
correct.
When we uplift the civilization we are in, such as in the Philippines, there's everything. Everybody else will be uplifted.
Wait
I
a
mean,
minute,
that
wait
is
a
the
minute.
way it is when,
Because this-
when
are we
our
talking
nation
about-
intervenes in other countries
And when these
and
up-
invests in.
Are we
When
talking
these
our
about-
commercial
uplifted people
investments.
say we no longer need to be exploited by the United States economic interests like United Fruit in Latin America or the rubber companies in the Philippines, you no longer want to uplift them. You want to kick those people out and put your own people in.
Hence, putting out President Mossadegh in Iran, putting him out and installing the Shah, which led to the Ayatollah Khomeini, by the way.
Which led to what's going on right
Exactly.
But what I wanted to say about all of the three movements that you mentioned and much of the remarks from Secretary Dulles is military force. Get in there, we got bigger guns, use them. And my thesis is this does not work in the 21st century. In spite of your threatening nuclear war every single second on your brinkmanship, it could happen now. And this is too dangerous for us to go around in this world shooting up people and dropping bombs because it's just too dangerous. So there's no solution in my mind, and you can call me an idealistic person if you want to. I don't think we have any choice. Our solutions have to be political.
now. Mr. Secretary, your background's law, correct?
Yes.
Well, because obviously you've never studied history in great detail.
I don't need to, sir.
What do you mean?
I
That's the
make
dumbest statement
history.
I ever
don't
heard from a
study.
Secretary of
He
State.
makes it, he makes it
He
up.
makes it up as he goes along.
You're right. That's incredible.
That is
Did
true,
you
sir.
tell President Eisenhower that?
I don't have to, sir. He has entrusted me with the foreign policy of the United States.
Mr. Secretary, if we do not understand history, we cannot
I don't
get
care if
our-
you do or not. Obviously, you
We
don't.
cannot get ourselves out of any problem that we're in now. We cannot. We will repeat it, as the famous saying is. So it would behoove you to learn some history.
But you know what I would, one of the things that I would like to see happen, and of course, we're not going to be able to end this conversation tonight. I mean, this will go on, and we know that. Because this is too important. We're talking about Syria, we're talking about the Ukraine, we're talking about exactly what's going on in the world today. And my thought is that your fingerprints are all over Middle Eastern policy, all over it. And one of the things that you have not spoken about is the interest that you, as Secretary of State, and your brother, as the head of the CIA, had in British Petroleum. See, no one talks about that. I don't believe that we here as this panel are unique. I think that for some reason, we are talking about something no one else wants to talk about.
Because it is not relevant, madam.
Really?
Your conflict of interest is not relevant. You've studied law. You know very well conflicts of interest are very relevant always.
The only conflict I am interested in, madam, is between the United States and the Soviet Union.
There's
And
no
those-
such thing as the Soviet Union anymore. You're talking about the past, and even when there was a Soviet Union, what was the threat other than some countries may have desire to have a different economic system than the United States.
A communistic system,
So
which
what?
is not compatible to
Because
our
they
values.
wouldn't trade with the United States, they wouldn't be subjected to United States imperialism to foster the growth of United States companies in those
But
countries.
Mr. Dostoevsky,
would be-
one of
Suppose
the-
it would be better for those people to have communism, sir.
let me
And
ask
I'm not a communist. You know, I was an anti-communist. I hated
But Mr.
communists.
Dostoevsky, here's a
I'm just
question
in-
that I have for you. Here's a question I have for you that I want to know how you feel about this. And that is, what is going on in this country today? How long have we been fighting the war in Afghanistan?
Oh my God,
And-
15 years
and-
almost?
and-
Well,
and
it's
why
the
are-
longest war we've ever been in.
And why are we fighting the war in Afghanistan?
It was originally to dislodge the Taliban movement. from
No,
power.
it was originally to dislodge the communists. Because you
That's right.
That's originally why we got
in
involved.
fact,
That's right.
when Mother Russia was in Afghanistan, the United States armed the Taliban to fight against
Precisely.
my country.
For their
And those
freedom, so
arms
that they
and-
may be a free nation, free of atheistic communism.
You
sir.
know,
Yeah, and you
A
got
system
yourself
that you would have
Osama
been
bin
appalled
Laden,
by.
and he had the American weapons that you gave him.
That's where, I mean, here, bulletin, newsflash, Osama bin Laden was emboldened and empowered by the United States.
States of America.
Yes, he
See,
was
I mean,
useful
no,
to
I
us
want to
at
make
a
sure, I want to
time.
repeat that. I want to repeat that for our audience because I want to make clear that they understand this. Osama bin Laden was empowered by the United States of America. And Saddam Hussein was empowered by the United States of America.
And that's just the top
That's the
of
monsters that you all created.
In Afghanistan, their paranoia about Mother Russia led them to support anybody, and look what it got them.
Right. Right. And when Russia was controlling Afghanistan, they were in a lot better shape than they are now. And as a matter of fact, somebody told me just
Talking
recently,
about economically.
and lots of other ways too. Somebody told me just recently that the percentage of women physicians in Afghanistan is much higher than women physicians in the United States of America. That's a pretty bad condemnation of the country that you think has the right to do anything it wants everywhere.
That is not my concern, madam. And traditionally, I
Obviously.
do not think that women
Just as a sign of progress.
that is not the kind of progress I desire, madam.
Well,
The
we
only
don't really
progress that
care what
concerns
you
me is
desire.
economic growth and development in a
For the
nation.
United States and for John Foster Dulles and for his brother Allen Dulles.
And for
And for the United States of
and
America,
for
madam.
British Petroleum that you all owned a lot of shares in and had control over, were paid.
Because we've touched on some topics, but we haven't really fully investigated them. I really want us to have the opportunity for our audience to get the notion of the maps and really synthesize that into their understanding. So we're at the point where we have to call this episode to an end, but Secretary Dulles, Sharif bin Ali, and Mr. Dostoevsky, I would implore, I would beg that you would return, and Babette and
We will both beg.
we will both beg for you to come back
back.
and give us an opportunity to discuss more fully these topics, because it is important that our audience understand the level of treachery that has been played upon the American people that they seem to not know. And so I'm going to, I hope that you will condescend to return. And this has been intriguing. And there's so many more questions that I have. And I would very much like to have the opportunity to explore them.
Yes, me too. And I'd like to look more at these maps.
Okay, so we will ask that you return, and we will ask our audience if you would be good enough. This has been Conversations Across Time. On behalf of my co-host, Babette Josephs, and Mr. Dostoevsky, Sharif bin Ali, and Secretary John Foster Dulles, we would ask that you will tune in to us next week to hear the conclusion of this very interesting and topical conversation across time. Thank you very much, and good night.
Conversations across time, conversations across